Hi guys, it's Jake, Nadia, and that's Sedona, and this is our little buddy boy, and today we're going to talk about White Lotus. We just finished the second season yesterday.
We did, but we watched the first and second one after the other. Really got into it right when the second season came out. We're going to talk about the first and second season, non-spoilers, and then we'll go into spoilers. So tell me, what is so interesting about The White Lotus? What makes it a good show in your eyes? Well, do you think it's a good show, first off?
I do think it's a good show. The seasons are like different with all different cast. There is one cast member who's the same, which I don't want to say right now because it could be a spoiler. Both seasons deal with a murder. And it's not a murder mystery, but it is about who was killed and who killed the person. I think what really makes the show good is it has a good sense of like humor and drama in there, which I think is more rare to find in a lot of shows. It's usually leaning one way or another.
Like a week in the life, each episode I like is that it's a full day, with these characters. And I feel like what this show reminded me of most was like a Robert Altman movie or something that would come out in like the 70s in a way, except it's stretched, into like a 8 episodes or 6 episodes, but we're just kind of following these characters as they intersect, in the same location, kind of what their little stories are, the little dramas. Sometimes they cross paths, sometimes they don't, but we're just kind of getting a slice of life in their world. And I think that the first season is especially like about class, has a really strong statement about the wealthy and how they get away with anything and that sort of thing. So there's a very strong like social critique going on in each season, but especially the first season felt most noticeable. And like I love Robert Altman, I love Nashville, I love like Shortcuts and McKeith and Mrs. Miller, but seeing it work this way in a TV series was just really interesting, and it felt like they had it stretched out just enough. It didn't feel like we were just like waiting for things to happen. It felt like it has a kind of a stately, leisurely pace, like a vacation pace.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like living with these characters as each day goes by, and of course shit starts to pile up, things start to go downhill. Things are going to end with a death. You're trying to figure out who it will be. That's not the most important part of the show. It's just kind of a hook to get you into the season. Once you're in, you're just kind of experiencing these characters who are cheating on their partners, who are, trying to get money, who are, all sorts of different personalities clashing in this like luxury world. It's really interesting.
Well, I first of all thought that season 1 it had more humor than season 2. I laughed a lot more in season 1. I heard you laugh a lot more in season 1 than season 2.
Oh.
As well, but I mean, if you thought it was equally funny.
I felt like season 2 was a little less focused, maybe. Season 1 felt like it, because I don't think they were planning on doing more seasons, honestly. I think season 1 went really well.
Season 2, I was just annoyed at that girl, the assistant girl. So maybe like that made it a little less funny.
Yeah, the social critique and satire in the first season was more pointed and directed at like a clear target. We're talking about colonialism. We're talking about people who always win, who can get away with anything, and those who are winners and losers in this capitalism, in this world. So, but had a lot of characters where you don't really like them, but you like part of them. You kind of are rooting for some and really rooting against others. The storytelling and the way we get to appreciate these characters is by seeing them in really tough situations, which they all go through at some point, and are either discovering themselves at like turning points in their lives, seeing it all come together in kind of this like mess. It's really exciting.
I really enjoyed it too. I would rate it...
Season 1, what would you rate it?
Oh, you want me to rate them separately?
Yeah.
All right. So season 1, I would rate it a solid 9.
Okay.
Season 2, I'd rate it a solid 7.89.
Solid 7.89. I would give the first season an 8 and the second season an 8. It's very funny, and I think it's, when you look at like, we were just watching the morning show, when you look at how that's trying to criticize society, the world in a certain way, this is how you do satire. This is how you be smart with your critique. And it's sort of like Succession in that way, where we're dealing with a bunch of assholes who are unlikable, but you have sympathy for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of realism in there.
Yeah, it feels very real. There's a lot of very specific, and like the writers know who they're talking about, who they're writing about. So, first season, spoilers, who dies?
Well, yes, the manager dies, but it's awesome because you are deceived into thinking that it would be the wife of the newly married
Yes,
couple.
yeah, you think it's going to be the wife, and she
Um,
doesn't. That was so interesting. So, and that's what I love about the show is that they have different stories that all have their things that are really interesting. You know, you have that couple, and then you have the older, middle-aged couple who's she's the CEO, and the husband who's always in some kind of crisis about life, and and they're having to deal with each other. And then you have, the manager who's like having a breakdown and is relapsing with drugs. But yeah, like I feel like that couple, there's something about it where it's just like almost like reality TV, except it's not reality TV. It's like very, really smart. You love to hate certain characters, and you're just like yelling at the TV, like, "Oh, what an idiot! Like, why doesn't she yell at him or like break up with him?" That sort of stuff.
What I really enjoyed about the first season, first of all, the show, the writers misleading us into thinking that it was going to be the newlywed wife when it ended up being the manager himself, which we never would think in the beginning. Second season, I felt like it was a lot less mystery because we were like, well, we don't know who it would be. So we're genuinely looking. The first season, at least I felt like, okay, it's going to be the wife who just got married. She's going to die in some way. And as the season progressed, you increasingly think that the husband has something to do with it because the husband is arrogant and she's feeling alone, or that she was going to...
Or there'd be an accident or something.
Yeah, it was going to be something tragic. And so I really liked that about the first season. I also liked the discourse. We talk about what you said, people who colonized and mindset and acceptance.
Because it takes place in Hawaii.
Yeah. And then like how that worked, what you were being entertained by, what you are ignoring in that entertainment. For example, like the Hawaiians in the show, their storyline is that their land was stolen by the resort, the property. The property owners of the resort. Obviously these people have billions, millions of dollars, so they can't, like, it's not on the same playing field. And in order to get money, even though their land was stolen from them, they're working at the resort who is responsible for this displacement because they can't afford, right? They have to live somehow. You have a family, the middle-aged family who are parents who are like talking about privilege and saying,
well, that's what I really loved is that the dynamic in that family where you have the Sydney Sweeney character who's like in college and so smart, knows everything, and is always trying to like educate and like talking down to her parents, and her parents who don't know these topics and who are very privileged and come off as super ignorant.
I don't think they don't know this topic. I think they know this topic.
No, but they don't care, and they aren't educated in the current discourse. And Sydney Sweeney character who is like, she knows so much, and she has her best friend who she brings along, and at first it seems like they're very close, and then it starts to devolve, as it's like she realizes like, no, she, as much as she pretends to be, woke and smart and whatever, and be different from her parents and breaking the cycle of this kind of like mentality of greed, she starts to recognize, no, that she's exactly like them. She wants to not be like them because it's not in vogue, it's not fashionable to be like that openly. And but she starts to see the true colors there. And I think it's very heartbreaking, when she sees the kind of wreckage that occurs, behind the family. And
I think it's more heartbreaking for her friend, to be honest. I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know if she ever recognizes it.
I'm talking about the friend.
Oh, friend. Okay.
I'm not talking about the daughter. I'm talking about the friend. How it's heartbreaking for her, because she tries to get money to her boyfriend there, and by telling him about the bracelets, which like obviously super flawed plan, like it wouldn't have worked out, I think, at all. But the fact that, he happens to be in the room when the mom comes in there and then he attacks her. It was just, very bad. But basically she feels like, I've ruined this guy's life, which like, yeah, his life is ruined. Like he's not gonna.
And he was such a nice guy too.
It is very sad. And she feels, obviously responsible. You have the dad who's like constantly in crisis mode, and his like wife is just sick of him. And then he finally gets like redeemed in a way because he tries to fight the guy in the room, and it's It's like,
well, the guy, he cheated on his wife. He had an like affair, and his wife having a hard time, understandably, forgiving him. And then he saves her when they think it's a burglary, which it is. He suddenly becomes a hero, and his whole objective throughout the season is to be respected by his family because he feels like he's not. He kind of feels like he's not, quote unquote, a real man because he doesn't make as much as his wife. So he has this like ideology about what a man should be and what his dad. And then he discovers, as you guys know, that his dad was either gay or bisexual. And so he kind of goes into a little crisis of what like he thinks a man should be. And I think he's dealing with his own internal homophobia as well. At the end, he just ends up like saving his family and getting respect from his kids and wife, and everything is fixed. And I think the message out there is, you know what, like some people, like they're just going to stay privileged because they have it like that, right? And they're just kind of lucky in life.
The world is, insanely unfair.
Yeah, I think that's the message, and that's what I mean with like the realism in this whole show is that it doesn't give like unrealistic ending of like, oh, happy ending. Like the people who are supposed to be avenged are avenged. And I think it's really interesting and great that even with the like kind of like dark message of that, right, when you really look at it in context, it still manages to find incredible humor. It still manages to find very like upbeat attitude throughout the whole season within the characters. I think it has enough diversity of different characters in there to make a lot of people feel like they kind of fit in, or they've been that friend, or they've been that wife, or whatever else, which I think makes it really successful.
Yeah, and the Jennifer Coolidge character especially
stands
out. She is just like any of the other very wealthy, privileged people there. She mourning her mother, and she's not like mentally stable at this time, but she's she's constantly leading on this person who works at the hotel who does massages, and she like fixates on her and obsesses over her and is like, I could help you make a business. Really heartbreaking to watch this woman go out of her way to just please her and make a business plan for her and take it seriously. And I knew from the beginning, I'm like, she's just saying this, there's no way she actually means this. She doesn't actually want to start a business. Like, this is just another thing that she can just say because she's so rich. It doesn't matter the consequences of what she says or does. And as much as you kind of like are rooting for her in a way because she's like quirky and funny and is sympathetic in a lot of ways, you see ultimately she's just like everyone else. She's just leaving damage in her wake, because you can sympathize with her like having these issues with her mom and mourning her mom and not knowing what and being lonely and wanting to find love. You can sympathize with these things, but ultimately she is what she is. She's leaving behind this wreckage in her path.
The message for me in that sense was, well, first of all, her character seems like she's like more like the hero in the beginning because she kind of she's struggling. You think that she's like, she says a lot of supportive things. I think you think that she's just very like real, even if it's in a cringy way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize she's just like everyone else. I think that's more evident than ever. As a privileged person, she uses a person of color who's obviously struggling, and a lot of, not just her, the woman who is newlywed does that too.
Mm-hmm.
But like they just rely on her to be able to like solve problems, give advice, but they don't like give anything back. They kind of just almost feel like kind of like leveling up to their promise, right? Like, because Jennifer's character, she kind of tells them like, hey, I can help you make your own business, encourages her and tells her like, I want to help you, I can help you, then like discards her at the end when she gets what she wants, and I think that kind of speaks a little higher to society, to kind of the drainage and education, I also think the mother-in-law was really funny.
Molly Shannon played that. Yeah, that was really good.
And the husband, the newlywed husband, oh my gosh, he
annoying, so hateable. And that's the thing, like you hate him so much, and his feud with the manager was so funny.
The manager poops.
Yeah, he poops. But I mean, the thing is, you think like you just want them to finally get the revenge and like show them, when you think that's going to happen when the manager is like, I'm getting fired, I have nothing to lose. but then he gets stabbed, and I was like, I mean, it's like, it has that very cynical thing where it's just like, this is the way it is. Like, they're not
well,
going to,
I think it's really heartbreaking that he, like,
this
tries...
annoying asshole.
Yeah, I think it's really heartbreaking that he, like, tries to... He's sober for 5+ years, and this asshole literally drives him so crazy, and he gets his hands on drugs, he relapses, and then...
From the girls.
Yeah, and every time he tries to, like, stay clean, this obsessive, entitled brat won't leave him alone. You feel so bad for him. And I think at the same time, there's humor in that because he's, like, very humorous when he's high. So... There's a lot of comedy in there, but at the same time, it, like, I think shows workplace harassment because, of how he uses his power to negotiate sexual favors from his employees. And there's a lot of problems there. So that's what I mean again, is that the show...
they're all humans. They all have multiple sides to
them, but the show manages to find humor in all of that, which I think, I completely...
It finds humor, but it also doesn't make anyone just a one-dimensional villain.
Exactly. That's why it's funny. Because you can see they're not just all good or bad. They're a mix of everything. And
except maybe the newlywed guy.
Well, yes, but it's like he's so petty that's what makes him so funny.
He's
like funny. Very petty, and it's like, oh my god, leave it fucking alone. Especially when the wife is like trying to talk to him and he just can't. Like, he's like, we have our whole life to talk. And I love that scene where the wife is trying to argue with him. We're in an argument. Okay, you know what? We have our whole life to argue. Like, I need to take care of this and complain about this. He's like obsessed with the manager. So obsessed. And then he keeps calling his mom. His mom crashes their honeymoon.
Yeah.
And so it's just really funny.
But in the end, she doesn't leave him. She says she will, but she ends up going back.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of it is because she's not stable. There's a power dynamic there, right? If she leaves, when she says she wants to leave him, she basically threatens her with lawyers.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you better be sure you want to go down this path because it's going to get dark. And she knows what that means because you can see that she's seeing what he's capable of, how far and petty he is.
Yeah, and they're in a totally loveless marriage to the fact where he's comfortable just coercing her into staying in the marriage that way.
He wants a trophy wife.
He doesn't care. He literally doesn't. He just wants her to have sex with. Like, he really, and that's pointed out a lot in the show where it's like he values nothing about her except for that.
Yeah, and he kind of gaslights her when she tries to, like, get him to respect her for more than just her body or face. And he's like, wait, you have a problem with me being attracted to you? And it's like, that's not what she's saying.
No.
But...
he doesn't give a shit about any of her interests or passions or what she wants to do.
But I think that's a lot of people too, I think we're like, we're all like, I think that shows a toxic dynamic that's not obviously toxic because there's no evidence of like physical abuse, but there is evidence of emotional abuse that's not very obvious unless you really dissect into the power dynamic of the whole couple. And I think it shows again, like, entitlement and how he's really blind and he's really like nurtured into a bubble, right? And it's really hard to burst that bubble because why burst it? Like, he doesn't need to burst it. He doesn't need to work for the rest of his life. So, season 2?
Yes. So, season 2, we're in Sicily.
So, season 2 takes place in Sicily. We are first introduced to the whole season with these 2 escorts mainly, who basically end up sleeping with every person.
They kind of have their hand in like everything going on. Like, the stories all kind of have to do with them.
Except for Jennifer's character and her assistant.
Jennifer Coolidge. Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you have the manager who's trying to get them out at the first episode, and by the end, she's, like, sleeping with one of them. We have the father who's, like, disgraced. He's, like, this movie producer with his father and son, and kind of... I was really interested in their story, seeing the dynamic of, like, these guys kind of repeating history of being, sort of predatory and just sleeping around with everyone. He's, like, destroyed his marriage, and he sleeps with these escorts, and then his son starts sleeping with one of the escorts too.
Well, his son, yeah.
In an innocent way, he doesn't realize she's an escort, but he's a very good guy, and he's like very aware.
Naive.
He's naive. Yes, sees the mistakes of his father and his grandfather and wants to not go down that path, you know?
This Hollywood producer, Dominic, his son, Albie, ends up sleeping with the escort and falling for the escort that his father hired because his father has sex addiction. It's really interesting because, you know, he makes a lot of good points about society, judgment of females and everything else. Unfortunately, because this series is diving more into realism, the escort that he sleeps with ends up playing him. He ends up learning, but what I really learning his lesson not to trust everyone, but at the same time, or not to also like just automatically assume that every escort is a victim. I think there's some kind of self-empowerment in that message as well. Like she is actually adding on to her goals, you know, and there's a lot of power in that as well. So whichever way you want to look at it. But what I really love is that his character at the end doesn't change. What I hate is Jennifer's character, her assistant. She's so toxic. Like she honestly made the score a little low for me in season 2 because her character was very unsympathetic because she gets Albie is really helping her in the beginning. You know, Jennifer doesn't she doesn't tell her husband that she has her assistant in the vacation with her, and so
so funny. I mean, she's just trying to like hide from their sight.
Yeah, so like she tells her assistant like, hey, go to your room, don't come out. But then obviously she has to eat, she needs to get out, she can't just be stuck in her room 24/7, and they just end up like randomly running into each other no matter where they are. Yeah. But like anyway, she relies on Albie. She meets Albie in order to kind of show her around. He's very inclusive of her, helping her out while she's alone. He develops feelings for her, but then she kind of deems him as being too nice. So she wants something more, a little bit more bad boy type. She meets the bad boy type. Mm-hmm. Ditches Albie and kind of discards him as soon as she meets someone that she likes. Basically almost ghosts him. Then at the end, she finds out, since this is a spoiler section, as you guys know, the guy that she liked ends up being super toxic, being hired to kidnap her and kill her. Then at the airport, when she meets Albie again, they end up exchanging numbers, and I kind of hated that. Like I wanted her to just disappear and not like taint Albie anymore because he's such a lovable character that it's kind of like hard to see his heartbreak, you know? You want like a happy ending, like someone who kind of you want him to fall in love with someone who loves him equally, I guess.
Yeah, I mean he's very naive, but you know, there is that kind of like sense that he's following down his father's path when there's like a woman walks by them in the airport and you see all
at the end,
the grandfather, the father, and the son, they all turn their head and watch.
Well, it's the idea of cycle never breaking, right? Because the dad keeps telling and blaming his father for his sins.
Yes.
Because he says, you never showed me how to love a woman. You know, you were always cheating on mom. Mm-hmm. You're always like disrespecting mom, you know? And the dad just doesn't get it. And then the son is resentful of his dad because he heard his mom cry because of his dad, you know? So it's like, it's a whole cycle. And you think the son is going to break the cycle because the son educates them and everything. In a way, it's similar to the story of the girl who was vacationing with her college friend in season 1 and how she thought she was breaking the cycle. But in a lot of ways, you discover the more and more you follow the story that she's not really breaking that much of the cycle. You kind of see something similar, or I think the show hints at something similar. Like, I think there's a little parallel there.
I think so. And I think that if there is a theme to the second season, because I think it's less about, well, I mean, it is about wealth. It's less about like those who have and those who don't. It feels more like the theme was sex, relationships, infidelity. What does that mean for, I guess, well, different, you know, people on the social hierarchy, you know, and including like the escorts, you know, and how they navigate that world, what that means to them compared to those who are like the Aubrey Plaza, you know, couple. And when they have so much wealth now and he's visiting his old buddy, and how their world is so alien from what they're used to now that they have a ton of money, you know, so and how they're kind of navigating the relationship dynamics there in that new world. It's really interesting. And I really liked the story of, those two couples and how they're just chaotic and messy. And it was very like frustrating in a good way, because it's like frustrating to watch it happen, because you're like trying to figure out like what's the deal with these people. But I think it worked.
I think like Daphne and Harper's character is really interesting. Those are played by Theo James. And I forget the actress's name. Apologies. Because you think that Daphne and Cameron have this great relationship, and Harper is very judgmental of Daphne and Daphne and Cameron's relationship to her husband Ethan, because she's like, there's no way someone is as happy. And you think in the beginning, like maybe Harper is just being a hater, and and like maybe they are that perfect, but then you realize she's right. They actually end up cheating on each other, and they play this like weird game with each other where they like cheating on each other. They both like this game. Realize it's kind of like they're happy because they have an open relationship. What's interesting is that Harper, even though she's really judgmental of Daphne and Cameron's relationship, she ends up having a very similar relationship at the end of them, yeah. Because Ethan doesn't have a backbone. He kind of follows his college friend and, lives by his rules when he's around him. And Cameron kisses the escorts, which we were talking about earlier. And then Ethan kisses the escorts that we were talking about earlier, and Harper discovers the condom. And then she doesn't realize, like, she's like, did he cheat on me? What happened? That kind of unravels into Harper then cheating on Ethan with Cameron, who's a womanizer and wants what he can't have. And then at the end, instead of actually being open and saying, like, we shouldn't do this, this is not who we are, they end up like, the whole time their storyline is they're not attracted to each other anymore. Mm-hmm. At the end, they are incredibly attracted to each other. Mm-hmm. They are really in the sack, doing it like any married couple. And it's like, okay, so this is a spark apparently that they needed. And it's really interesting, how that plays out.
It's not what you expect to come out of that's what I like, is like you keep thinking like, okay, they're going to break up, there's going to be some kind of explosive thing, but it's just like, oh, normalized. Okay, yeah. it's very funny kind of how that turns up, and that was really good. It was just surprising, and I think the last episode is the best episode of the second season, because that's also when like the most dramatic theatrical stuff happens, because the whole episode, it's like, or the whole season, you're slowly building towards this plot that doesn't really reveal itself until the last episode when they piece it together. This is Jennifer Coolidge's character and her assistant, when they piece together that, they're going to get killed. She's going to get killed, Jennifer Coolidge, so that her husband can get her money. And this was all plotted, and it's like, oh my God, this is terrible. And she's been hanging out with these guys who she thinks are her friends, and there's this mafia guy who's going to do the kill. And it ends in the most perfect way. And in the funniest, but it's also like the funniest and just like weirdest way it could have gone, where she is able to get the gun, and then she kills everyone. And she's like barely looking. She kills everyone. Perfect. Right at the shot. Perfect shot. Yeah. And then she's trying to escape the yacht to get into the boat so she can go back. And she's just like really like struggling. And then she just trips, lands, crashes her head into the boat, and drowns. And that was actually an interesting surprise, because you think the dead person is going to be someone else, because she was the only person who migrated from season 1 to season 2. Yeah. And you think that she's the only person who's going to like vacation in season 3, but no. And her assistant, like I said, does end up making it alive. She honestly was really black. Like, even when there was danger right then and there, she still really like laughing. She's still like, wait. So even when the killer, like the guy that she's dating, like ends up letting her live and drops her near the airport, she's like, wait, where are you going? Kind of thing. It's like, I know. And she's he was like suspected this whole time. He wants to not kill me. How sweet. No, she comes across as incredibly lost and naive, and not really having a clue. Well, also she's like smiling in a lot of the scenes as well, when she's like, and I think it's more like an uncomfortable thing, uncomfortable
uncomfortable tick because I smile a lot when I'm uncomfortable, or I'm like, you know, and it looks like I'm like happy, but I'm really like uncomfortably smiling. But I think because it was mixed with her action of identifying that she's in danger, clearly identifying that she's in danger, yet makes these choices, you know, where she like waits until she gets in a car secluded with the guy that she thinks is like dangerous to be like, are you dangerous? Like when no one is around, she waits until that moment to confront him. When she does end up like, you know, surviving because he ends up letting her live, she's not making very active choices to survive. It's almost like she's just like, I don't know, kind of thing. And that's why I didn't really like that she was with Albie at the end, because it's like he's making a lot of active choices, and he's, I think, realizing he got played, and he's very like self-aware. Even though he's naive, he's self-aware of, well, at least as far as I have seen in the show, like he kind of sees his actions. He really dissects the world that he's in. And I'm like, oh man, I think she's gonna be the one to turn him completely into an asshole. Like his dad kind of thing sometimes.
I was more optimistic. I got the sense that maybe they both learned an important lesson on this trip.
You would think, like, I'm optimistic for him. I'm not optimistic for her, because she had so many chances where she could have shown, like I said, and she was never like, she wasn't making active choices, you know? All right, well, that is basically all we have to say. Obviously, there's a lot that's going on, but we kind of highlighted the things that we felt like were most memorable. Let us know what you thought was memorable, what you liked, what you didn't like, what other shows you'd recommend. Otherwise, we will see you guys soon.
See you soon.
Bye.